things I often get asked on Tumblr and sometimes in Ask is how do I feel about certain cliches in werewolf fiction and vampire fiction. And as a general rule of thumb, my opinion is this: you can't tell if a cliche is going to be good or bad when you use it just on the nature of the cliche itself. It depends on how the writer uses it. Anything can be good or bad depending on how the writer uses it in the story. Cliches aren't inherently a bad thing. In fact, they're good, which is why people use them so often and default to them. It's when your story is made up of nothing but cliches and you don't add anything to it that it necessarily becomes a serious problem that needs to be addressed. However, talking about, werewolf and vampire cliches, I did think about what are some things that I honestly don't like or particularly care for in werewolf and vampire fiction, because I think those two are really the biggest ones, and then, after that it's kind of phased, getting more popular now, and sometimes witches, but not enough. We need more witches. So what are some things that I generally don't care for in terms of werewolf and vampires? And I wrote it down in my little, this is kind of like my countdown book, what I call it. Like anytime someone asks me like, what are your top favorite or top least favorite this, I kind of write it in here, so I kind of have a writing record of it. Talk about the 5 werewolf and the 5 vampire cliches that I like the least in fiction. And these are just my own personal preference, so take them with a grain of salt. These are just my opinions, and these are my 5 least favorite vampire and werewolf cliches. Number 5 on the list is on the list of both. I hate vampires versus werewolves. I think that this is a stupid idea. I think that it makes, for the most part, no sense. There's no reason why I think they should fight. I think it's just more like, wouldn't it be cool if a vampire and a werewolf fought each other? I think it actually started because of, of the Universal horror movies, and I think there was a movie where, the werewolf met Dracula, and that's kind of where the whole thing started off. But if you look at, like, even in Dracula, the book, wolves are kind of portrayed as more like distant cousins and stuff like that. Like, wolves are children of the night, just like, vampires would be. And I don't like it because it's usually never used to any real good, effect. It's just more like, wouldn't it be cool? And it's like, well, vampires and werewolves, why wouldn't they not? It just kind of to the point where I just kind of wish it would go away. Because most of the time it's used as love triangle bullshit, and that just throws me off completely. But even outside of that, I don't see a real reason why vampires and werewolves would not get along. I mean, they don't hunt the same things, they're not after the same prey. There's no reason for them to fight one another. They wouldn't need to compete for resources. There technically would never be enough of either of them to be a threat to either one, and they wouldn't all be in the same pockets of the area, so why the hell would they not like each other? I don't understand, just on the basis of werewolf and vampires, why they would not necessarily get along unless you add like some sort of your own mythology to it. But just on the basis of they're supernatural and therefore they hate each other because they're different, I think that's kind of asinine. I don't really see any real reason for them not to get along. Number 4 for vampires is vampire sex. And not to say that a vampire should be able to have sex, it's more like, I feel like there are certain things about vampire sex that are kind of weird. One of the things I will compliment the Anita Blake series for is that vampires aren't able to get erections unless they intake blood. And I think that makes sense. I don't think that vampires should be able to have hours and hours and hours of mind-blowing sex if they're not drinking blood. Because it's like, you need blood to get an erection, and if you're not using any blood, no erection for you. This wouldn't really affect, vampire-human relationships, but a lot of the time they don't bite the human until right at the end, so they could boom, climax. I'm just like, wouldn't you need that periodically? Especially if you're directing all that blood there in the main point, you would be using it for longer and draining more of your resources. So, in my opinion, in those hours and hours of fucking, if you weren't biting her, you would just go flaccid, it right in the middle of it. And which is kind of a funny image. A lot of people make it so that vampires really don't suffer anything for being vampires, and so it's just angst. But how would you feel if you were, if you're a guy, you can only get hard if you drink someone's blood, and you have to keep drinking blood to stay erect, because otherwise you just go flaccid. And for women, I think you still need blood during, things, so that way you'd be able to have more pleasurable sex. So sex would be something that, would limit you unless you did feed properly. And I think that adds, if you want to talk about eroticism, I think that makes more, it makes a more interesting story, especially when you talk about human vampire relationships. They would want to be with humans more because it's easier. Number 4 for werewolves is I don't like it when werewolves turn into normal sized wolves. I feel that my favorite types of werewolves are the perfect human were hybrid. I mean, like big, like tall, and they have features that are part human but part wolf. Like they're bigger, stronger. Like I think the werewolf from Van Helsing is probably just visually my favorite type of werewolf. I love that. I love it's like monster and man. That's my favorite. That's one of the things that I'll always take away from the movies. I love that type of werewolf. I think that's just perfect. That's how I envision werewolves forever. They're just normal looking wolves, but they're very big. I can deal with that because at least, you know, that's kind of, you know, it. But I like when they're human wolf hybrids, because that's what being a werewolf is. You know, it to me, it's kind of like, it's just a normal sized wolf or a really big wolf. That's kind of lame. You know, I prefer them to be either more human wolf mixed or just really huge. Otherwise, it's kind of like, number 3 for me is when vampires eat animal blood. I hate this. This is stupid. I don't like it in any incarnation, because I don't like it, because cause especially when it's successful, because like even if it's not as strong as regular people blood, I hate it being effective, period. I want it to make them puke. I feel like if you're a vampire, you drink animal blood, it should have like really serious consequences on you. It should make you like half rotty. It should make you really like, it should be disgusting. It should be like rancid to you, because vampires don't drink animal blood. You drink human blood, okay? I don't like it because it's a cop out. It's used to kind of like have more angst and be like, I don't want to hurt people. I want to. I'm like, you know what? Stop, okay? You eat people. That's what you do. You don't even eat people. You don't have to kill someone to be a vampire, depending on what, you know, what can you're going through. So I don't like animal blood being able to sustain a vampire's life. Nope. Sorry. Human blood or no blood at all. Number 3 for werewolves, I hate Hereditary Lycanthropy, which basically means that you can be born a werewolf. I don't like this. For me, lycanthropy in terms of werewolves is a curse, and it should be viewed as such. You should only be able to become a werewolf if you have been bitten by a werewolf. If you want to do something like a pack sort of thing, you can, you know, have it be a pack, be people who are werewolves, who live in a community together. They have the alpha or whatever, because I'm going to talk more about this when we get to my number 1, but like if you're the alpha of the werewolf pack, you are the one who's turned all these people into werewolves, and if they have children, they can choose to turn their children into werewolves and bring them into the pack, and they can choose to go out of the pack. But I don't think that Hereditary Lycanthropy is really interesting to me, because it's just like, it's supposed to be a curse, it's supposed to be a bad thing, which is like, no, just born this way. Number 2 for vampires is when they eat normal food. I hate it. What are you gonna do? It's just like whatever, like this happens a lot in like some of the teen vampire shows. Like they'll like be having dinner or drinking tea or something like that, or like eating whole meals. Like, what are you gonna do after you're done? Because you can't crap anymore, you can't pee anymore, you don't have, your digestion system doesn't work anymore. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna puke it up? And when I think about that, it just ruins the allure of the vampire. Because it's that thing of like, oh, you know, this classy, dangerous vampire, he's eating the steak dinner and like totally like minding you. But like when you're done, he has to go in the back room and throw up all his food because he can't digest it. And like how did that even work? Like I'm picturing like Dracula having to heave out an entire turkey dinner, and like he wouldn't even be able to break down the turkey. It would just be just like whole globs. It's just gross. I don't like it. And it's just like, also just building up on the food thing, I also hate it when vampires drink blood like out of bottles. Like in True Blood, when they're not drinking like the True Blood like the regular drink, and they just have like blood that just poured into glasses and just drink it, I hate that so much. That happens in True Blood, it happens in like Vampire Diaries. I hate that. Coagulation, okay? Blood wouldn't just sit that way. Like I remember in True Blood the other day, it was just like, this is like 1,000-year-old blood. I'm just like, why is it fresh? Why is you just be able to pour it like it's wine? It's not wine. Blood coagulates unless you have it under a certain temperature. So if it's not like body temperature, if it's just sitting there, it's not gonna... it'd be slushies, okay? But anyway, I don't like it when vampires eat. That's the main point. I don't like it when they eat regular food. I think it kind of undermines the mystique of a vampire when you see them eat human food. Because you know that unless you get a scene where they're ripping open their stomach and pulling it out, and or something that's really gory or really takes advantage of that kind of like imagery, it's really... It ruins the mystique, and it brings up really funny images of really scary vampires puking up all their food. Because... And even the puking it up wouldn't even... Like, how would you even make... Don't eat. Just drink blood, okay? Gosh. Number 2 for werewolves is I don't like it when werewolves can't transform by will. I like the fact that it's a curse. It should be affected by the lunar cycle. The closer you get to the lunar cycle, you act more and more like a werewolf, and then for the days when you have the full moon, you become a full werewolf. And then it goes off, you know, like from waxing to waning. I don't like it just being like, poof, werewolf, poof, human, poof, werewolf, poof, human. Even though I've seen it and it works a lot, again, this is just my personal preference. I prefer it when you become a werewolf and you have no choice, where you have to transform during this time. It just makes it more interesting, because I feel like it adds more danger to the situation, because you have a whole period where you're not able to defend yourself against other, you know, monsters, because you only turn into a werewolf for those few days. And I feel like that's what makes it a curse. You can't control it. You can't help it. It just happens naturally. The whole thing about, you know, them making vampirism so, you know, casual, like the eating stuff, and this thing is not so much that it's like, it may seem nitpicky, but I don't like it when they make it so easy for you to be either a werewolf or a vampire. It's not supposed to be a completely awesome thing. You can have super strength, but you also have to have downsides. If you make it so it's softened up, so like, oh yeah, you're a werewolf, but now you can transform whenever you want. You just have regular sized will. You got your whole brain. It makes it from something that used to be a curse, something that was dangerous, something that could really be an issue of torment for a person, into something that's kind of like, yeah, you know, sometimes I transform into a werewolf, you know. My number 1 thing that I don't like for vampires is I don't like Dhampirs, or Dhampirs, however you want to pronounce it. Dhampirs. I don't like Dhampirs. I don't like the idea of vampire-human reproduction. I don't like the idea of vampire reproduction. So like stuff where like Underworld, I'm pointing to my Underworld poster even though you can't see it. I don't like that either. I don't like vampire reproduction, period. I don't think it makes sense. I don't think it's necessary. And I definitely don't like vampire-human reproduction, because one, it's usually only male vampires and female humans, because women for some reason are not allowed to have babies, and so, which makes sense. They would not be able to have kids, but men shouldn't be able to have the kids either, because sperm doesn't, you can't do it, okay? The reason why I don't like Dhampirs especially is because for the most part it's just kind of like, you get the best of both worlds, you get super strength but you walk in the sun, got the best of both worlds. It's like there's really nothing, they really balance it out so there's no downside, and so that being a Dhampir is just kind of like, oh my god, I'm the coolest of them all, I can do whatever I want. If they did it so that Dhampirs had to deal with more pros and cons, you know, that would make it better for me, but instead it's just kind of like pure awesomeness. The only time I ever really liked it was in Blade, which is biased because I just like Blade, so therefore I accept it more, but also because he wasn't born of, you know, vampire human sex. It was kind of an accidental thing, and I think that way it made sense, made it work. He was a rarity. It wasn't that anybody could just suddenly become. Although technically, if you think about it, you could technically create a whole group of them if you just repeated the same thing that happened to Blade, but, you know, maybe they don't know the details. But I just don't like Dhampirs. I don't like them being able to reproduce. I just feel like it's one of those things that just done to like have a character that's like uber badass cool. Like they're most of the time they'll make it so that like Dhampirs are more attractive, they are more like exotic or whatever, and it's just like they never balance it out so that I actually feel like they're compelling people. It's just more like, I wanted to make this cool character. I just don't like it. That's why this is like just my own personal preference. I don't like Dhampirs. Finally, my number 1 for werewolves is Douche Alphas. I don't like this. I don't like this for one major reason. Wolves don't work like that. Okay, everyone has this idea that like number 1, alphas in terms of wolves are like super hyper aggressive and everything like that. That's not really how alphas are. most of the time, if anyone's going to be super hyper aggressive in a pack, it's the beta wolf. And if you look now at what people have been saying about wolves and about how the whole pack system works, alpha wolves aren't necessarily like the toughest, baddest bitches. They are usually just the dads. Like alphas, what people are saying now is that alphas aren't really like the leaders. They're just the people who have kids. So that'd be like the older sibling or whatever. They're the people who would have, you know, the most authority because they're parents. They are parental figures. They're not really just, you know, the tough guys. And even so, if he messes up, the pack will go against them. It's not like this blind following of like, yes, we do whatever you say, pack master, woo. It's just like, and what they do with this whole thing, they have this whole thing like, I'm the alpha, I do what I want. I sounded more like Batman than anything else, but you get what I'm saying, like, I am in charge. And it's just like, please stop, because number one, you sound like you need an inhaler more than anything else, and two, it allows stupidity to happen in these characters because like they're in charge when really they're not. The pack would go against them. The pack would kick them out. You know, it's not a blind following thing. They would be the ones who are just responsible for like breeding. So, which I think is why it works to have the alpha of a pack in my idea of how werewolves should work. Just be the one who turns everybody else into werewolves. I don't think it makes sense for them to be like, oh yeah, I'm the baddest bitch. Those are my least favorite werewolf vampire cliches. Now, mind you, I may not like some of these cliches, but they do work in certain fiction. And there are certain books that I read that have those cliches, and I like them. But overall, not a fan of these things.